Welcome back to the Learn and Talk English podcast. We're so glad you could join us.
Yeah, we're excited for today's deep dive.
Today, we're tackling a topic that many of you have probably thought about, prepping for the TOEFL exam.
Right. The TOEFL, it can be a little intimidating for a lot of people.
It can.
Or,
We're here to break it down and make it, less scary, really.
yeah, and hopefully a little bit fun, too.
Absolutely. But first, for anyone who might be new to the TOEFL, let's just take a minute and define what it is.
Okay, so the TOEFL, it stands for Test of English as a Foreign Language. It's designed to assess the English proficiency of, well, anyone whose first language isn't English,
Makes sense.
especially if they're thinking about, studying or working in a place where English is spoken.
So it's kind of like a passport to opportunities.
Exactly. And it's recognized in a lot of places. We're talking over 12,000 institutions in more than 160 countries.
Wow, that's impressive. So, needless to say, doing well on this exam is pretty important.
It is. It is. So let's get into it. What exactly does the TOEFL, test?
Yeah, let's get specific.
Well, it covers 4 main areas: reading, listening, speaking, and writing. And each section has its own challenges.
Okay, a 4-part exam. That sounds pretty comprehensive.
It is. Starting with reading, you're going to encounter, think of it like dense academic passages, kind of stuff you might find in a journal or a textbook.
Right, I can see how that could be challenging, just the density of the material.
It is. And then the questions, they're not just asking you, did you understand this? They're testing your vocabulary, your ability to spot the main arguments.
Right, it's really pushing you to engage with the text.
Exactly. Now, the listening section. Think lectures, conversations, discussions, kind of like what we're doing right now.
Oh, fun.
The challenge there is not just understanding what's being said, but the tone, the context. Like, are they being sarcastic? What are the main takeaways?
That's a lot to process.
It is. Active listening is key.
And then we have the speaking section. This one, I imagine, makes a lot of people nervous.
It does, and it's broken down into 6 different tasks. You might be asked to give your opinion on something, summarize a conversation you've just heard, even problem solve based on an audio clip.
That's a lot of variety.
It is. They really want to see how well you can communicate under pressure.
Makes sense.
And then last, but certainly not least, we have the writing section.
Right, so you've got all this input, now you have to produce some output.
Exactly. It's 2 tasks. One is where you have to take information from a reading passage and a listening clip and, synthesize it all.
Wow. Okay, so you really have to be able to pull those key points and connect them.
You do. And the other task is an independent essay. They give you a prompt and you have to, build a strong argument.
So it's really testing your ability to write in an academic style.
It is.
Yeah.
So yeah, the TOEFL, it's a beast with 4 heads, but each one is important.
We've met the beast. Now the question is, how do we conquer it? What are some of those TOEFL secrets to success?
Well, we're going to get into all of that, but I think the most important thing, even before you open a book or, take a practice test, is goal setting.
Goal setting. Okay, that's interesting. So what do you mean by that?
Well, it's simple. Why are you taking the TOEFL? Where do you want to go to school or work? Because those places, they all have different TOEFL score requirements.
So you need to know what you're aiming for before you start.
Exactly. Do your research, find out what score you need, and then, this is important, aim a little higher.
Aim higher. Why is that?
It's like a safety net. You never know what can happen on test day. Plus, it can give you that extra motivation.
Okay, so research and set a goal, a slightly ambitious goal.
Precisely. And then, once you know what you're working towards, it's time to make a plan, a study plan.
Okay, study plan. I've heard that before, but I'm always curious, do you have any practical tips for making a study plan that you can actually stick to?
Oh, absolutely. The biggest thing is to be realistic. Don't try to cram everything in at the last minute.
It never works.
It never does. Start early, break it down into smaller chunks. Even just 30 minutes a day for each section is better than, trying to do 6 hours on the weekend.
That's great advice. So consistency over intensity.
Exactly. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
I like that. Now, what about resources? What should we be using to study?
Okay, the must-have, the absolute essential, is the official guide to the TOEFL test. It's made by the people who make the test, so it's the most accurate.
Right, that's our Bible.
Exactly. And there are a ton of other resources out there, like websites and apps, but be careful, make sure they're reputable.
So stick with the trusted names.
Exactly. Now, and I can't stress this enough, practice tests, practice tests, practice tests.
Yeah, they're important for just about every standardized test, but why are they so crucial for the TOEFL specifically?
Well, first, they get you used to the format, the timing, it's like a dress rehearsal. But even more than that, they help you identify your weaknesses.
Ah, so you can see where you need to focus your energy.
Yeah. Exactly. You take a practice test, you see what you struggled with, and then boom, you know what to study.
Okay, so practice test, not just for practice, but for strategizing.
Exactly. Now, before you even jump into a practice test, though, make sure you have a solid foundation. And by that, I mean your vocabulary and grammar.
Okay, back to the basics.
A strong vocabulary is essential, especially for the reading section. You need to be able to understand those academic texts.
And grammar. Why is that so important for the TOEFL?
Well, I mean, grammar is the structure of the language. If your grammar is weak, it's going to affect everything: your writing, your speaking, even your listening.
Right, I can see how that would have a ripple effect.
It does. So don't neglect those basic building blocks.
Okay, so we've got our goals set. We're working on our vocabulary and grammar. We're taking practice tests. What's next on the TOEFL success checklist?
The next step, and this is crucial, be honest with yourself. What are you good at? And more importantly, what are you not good at?
Okay, so self-assessment time.
Exactly. You need to know your strengths and weaknesses so you can, play to your strengths and work on those weaker areas.
Now hiding from those challenging sections.
Nope. And once you've identified those weaker areas, don't be afraid to ask for help. A tutor, a study group, whatever works for you.
Yeah, there's no shame in getting some extra support.
Exactly. And then as you're studying and practicing, keep time management in mind. The TOEFL is a timed test. You don't want to run out of time and leave questions unanswered.
Right, time management is key in any exam, but especially one like the TOEFL with so much to get through.
Exactly. So as you're doing those practice tests, time yourself. See where you're spending too much time and get comfortable working under pressure.
That's great advice. So we've talked about a lot of kind of general strategies, but what about those sections that tend to trip people up the most, like listening and speaking?
Okay. Yeah, those can be tough. The biggest thing with both of those is immersion. Surround yourself with English as much as possible.
Okay, immersion. I can see how that would help, but for people who aren't living in an English-speaking country, how can they really immerse themselves?
There are actually a lot of ways. Join English-speaking groups or clubs, find a language partner, even just watch English language TV shows and
Oh,
movies.
that's fun.
It is. And challenge yourself. Watch those shows without subtitles.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's taking it to the next level.
It is. And as you're listening, pay attention to how people speak. The pronunciation, the intonation, it all matters.
So it's about absorbing those nuances.
Exactly. And speaking of absorbing, let's talk about vocabulary. You can't ace the TOEFL without a strong vocabulary.
Right. But where do you even begin? The dictionary is like a million words long.
You don't need to learn every word. Focus on academic vocabulary, the words you're likely to encounter in, academic settings.
Okay, that makes sense. So any tips for actually learning and remembering all these new words?
Flashcards. They might be old school, but they work.
I love flashcards.
Make sure you're not just writing the word and definition. Use them in sentences, add pictures, make those connections.
Okay, so make them meaningful, not just rote memorization.
Exactly. And the key with flashcards, and really with all of this, is consistency.
Consistency, we keep coming back to that.
We do. Because it's the key to success, not just with the TOEFL, but with anything.
So make it a habit, not a chore.
Precisely. Whether you study every day, a few times a week, the important thing is to stick to it. Make steady progress.
Okay, that's great advice. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have. We've talked about goals, resources, strategies, but the real key is to take all of this and put it into action.
That's right. And remember, this is just part one of our TOEFL deep dive. We've got a lot more to explore, so make sure you stay tuned for the next episode.
And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss it.
Absolutely. See you next time.
All right, so we talked about that official guide in the last part.
Well, it's a great starting point.
It is, but there are other, resources out there that can be really helpful too.
Oh, absolutely. And one that I always recommend, especially because it's free, is YouTube.
YouTube for TOEFL prep.
I know, it might sound a little surprising,
Oh.
but trust me,
Yeah.
there are some fantastic YouTube channels that are dedicated to, like, helping people ace the TOEFL.
Interesting.
Yeah, you can find, like, channels that break down grammar concepts, give vocabulary tips, even have, like, simulated speaking tests.
That's pretty cool. I guess you can find just about anything on YouTube these days.
You really can. And it's not just about, watching videos passively. You can leave comments, ask questions, interact with other learners.
Right, so it can be a bit more engaging than just, reading a textbook.
Exactly. And if you are looking for a more structured approach, online courses are a great option.
Online courses, like what platforms are we talking about?
There are a bunch out there, like Udemy, Coursera, even ETS, the organization that makes the TOEFL. They have their own online courses.
Okay, so a lot of options. What are the advantages of doing an online course versus, just studying on your own?
Well, I think a big one is that structure. You have a set curriculum, homework assignments, sometimes even like live feedback from instructors.
Ah, so it's kind of like having a virtual classroom.
Exactly. And speaking of virtual, let's not forget about mobile apps.
Oh, yeah, those are super convenient.
There's some really great TOEFL prep apps out there. A couple I like are TOEFL Go and Magoosh.
Okay, and what makes those good?
They have like tons of practice questions, vocabulary builders.
Mhm.
You can even do simulated listening and speaking tests right on your phone.
Perfect for, when you have a few minutes to spare.
Exactly.
Right.
Now, I think it's important to talk about, we've covered a lot of things that you should do to prepare for the TOEFL, but what about things to avoid?
The pitfalls, the TOEFL traps.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And I think one of the biggest ones is neglecting your weak areas.
Oh, that's a classic.
It is. It's so tempting to just focus on the stuff you're already good at, but those weaknesses, they're going to hold you back if you ignore them.
Yeah, you got to face those fears head on.
Exactly. Be honest with yourself, figure out where you need the most work, and then, dedicate extra time to those areas.
Okay, so no hiding from those weaknesses. What else should we avoid?
Well, this one might seem obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people make this mistake.
Hmm.
Read the instructions carefully.
Ah, yeah, don't skim over those.
Don't skim. You'd be amazed how many points people lose just because they didn't understand what the question was asking.
Right, so slow down, take your time, make sure you know exactly what you need to do.
Precisely. Another pitfall is practicing without feedback.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, you can take all the practice tests you want, but if you're not getting feedback on your performance, you might be repeating the same mistakes over and over.
Ah, so you need someone to, point out those blind spots.
Exactly. Find a tutor, join a study group, whatever works for you, but make sure you're getting some kind of feedback.
Okay, so practice with purpose.
Exactly. And finally, and I think we all struggle with this one, procrastination.
The dreaded procrastination monster.
It's so easy to put things off, especially when it's something, stressful like studying for a big exam.
Right, but we all know where that leads.
Yeah.
Last minute panic.
Exactly. So start early, make a plan, break it down into smaller chunks, whatever you need to do to avoid that last-minute cram session.
Good advice. Okay, so we've talked about what to do, what not to do, but what about the, mental game? How do we approach the TOEFL with the right mindset?
That's so important. The TOEFL can be stressful, but it's crucial to go into it feeling confident and positive.
Okay, but how do you do that?
Well, first, remember that this is just one test. It doesn't define you as a person.
Right, it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. And focus on your strengths. What have you already accomplished? What are you good at? Remind yourself of those things.
So celebrate those wins, big or small.
Exactly. And if you do start to feel those negative thoughts creeping in, challenge them. Ask yourself, is this thought helpful? Is it even true?
Okay, so reframe those negative thoughts.
Precisely. And finally, take care of yourself. Get enough sleep, eat well, do things that help you relax and de-stress.
Self-care is so important, especially during stressful times.
It is. It's about nurturing your mind and body so you can perform at your best.
All right, so we've got the right mindset, we're taking care of ourselves. Now let's get into some more specific strategies for each section of the TOEFL.
Okay, let's do it. And I think a good place to start is the speaking section. That one tends to make people, particularly nervous.
Yeah, I can see why. You're on the spot, you have to think on your feet.
Exactly. So what are some tips for, calming those nerves and doing well in the speaking section?
Well, the first thing is practice, practice, practice. The more comfortable you are speaking English in general, the easier this section will be.
Right. So find opportunities to speak as much as possible.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to, talk to yourself in the mirror, record yourself, whatever it takes to get comfortable with the sound of your own voice.
Okay, so get over that initial awkwardness and just speak.
Exactly. And one technique that I find really helpful is called shadowing.
Shadowing. Okay, I've never heard of that.
It's basically listening to a native English speaker and then repeating what they say, trying to mimic their pronunciation and intonation.
Oh, interesting. So you're kind of like following in their footsteps.
Precisely. You can do it with podcasts, audiobooks, anything. It's a great way to, internalize those natural rhythms of English.
That's a great tip. And what about like during the actual speaking tasks themselves? Any advice for those?
One thing that can help is to take a few seconds before you start speaking to just, gather your thoughts.
Right. Don't feel like you have to jump right in.
You don't. Use that prep time to make a quick mental outline of what you want to say.
So it's about being strategic, even those timed responses.
Exactly. And then when you do start speaking, remember to speak clearly, enunciate your words. Don't rush.
Right. It's not a race.
It's not. And don't be afraid to use pauses, intonation. Those things make your speech more engaging and easier to understand.
Okay, so it's not just about the words themselves, it's how you deliver them.
Precisely. And if you make a mistake, it's okay. Just correct yourself and keep going.
Right. Everyone makes mistakes.
Everyone. The important thing is to stay calm and keep communicating.
That's great advice.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to the listening section.
All right. This one can be tough because, well, you only hear the audio clip once.
Right, no rewinds.
No rewind. So active listening is crucial here.
Okay, we talked about active listening before, but how does that apply specifically to the listening section of the TOEFL?
Well, you need to be really engaged. Take notes. Try to anticipate what the questions might be. Think of it like you're a detective gathering clues.
I love that analogy.
And pay attention to everything, not just the words, the speaker's tone, their intonation. Those things can tell you a lot.
Right, it's about reading between the lines.
Exactly. And listen for signal words and phrases. Things like, however, in addition, therefore. Those words can help you understand the structure of what the speaker is saying.
So they're like signposts guiding you through the information.
Precisely. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, focus on the main ideas first. Don't get bogged down in trying to catch every single detail.
Okay, so big picture first, then go back and fill in the gaps.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to make educated guesses. If you're not sure of an answer, use the context to help you.
Okay, so use your logic and your knowledge of the topic.
Exactly. Now, let's move on to the reading section. Those long academic passages can be pretty intimidating.
They can. So how do we tackle those?
Well, first of all, don't read them like you would a novel. Active reading is key here.
Okay, we've talked about active reading before, but I'm curious, what does that look like in the context of the TOEFL reading section?
It means engaging with the text. Highlight key points, take notes, ask yourself questions.
So make it an interactive experience.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to use a dictionary if you come across a word you don't know. It's more important to understand the overall meaning than to get hung up on every single word.
Right, so don't let those unfamiliar words derail you.
Exactly. And one thing I recommend is to preview the passage before you start reading in detail. Look at the headings, the subheadings, get a sense of the structure.
So you have kind of a roadmap.
Exactly. And then as you're reading, pay attention to the author's tone, their purpose. What are they trying to convey?
Right, it's about understanding the message behind the words.
Precisely. And again, pay attention to those signal words and phrases. They can help you understand the flow of the argument.
Okay, those little breadcrumbs are coming in handy.
They are. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, break the passage down into smaller chunks. Focus on one paragraph at a time.
Good advice. And it's important to remember this isn't a speed reading test.
Right. It's about comprehension. Take your time.
Quality over quantity.
Exactly. Now, we've talked about a lot of strategies, but let's circle back to that mindset piece. It's so important to go into the TOEFL feeling confident.
Absolutely. Confidence is key.
And one way to build that confidence is to focus on your past successes. Think about times you've overcome challenges, achieved goals.
Right, those wins, they give you that belief in yourself.
Exactly. And when those negative thoughts come up, challenge them. Ask yourself, are they helpful? Are they even true?
Okay, so take control of those thoughts.
Exactly. And remember, the TOEFL is just one test. It doesn't define you.
Right, it's just one step on your journey.
Exactly. So go into that testing center feeling prepared and confident. You've got this.
That's a great pep talk. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today, from general strategies to specific tips for each section.
We have, but we're not done yet. In the next part, we're going to dive even deeper into those individual sections and really break down those TOEFL tasks.
Okay, sounds good. So make sure you stay tuned for the final part of our TOEFL deep dive. We'll see you there. So we were talking about those online resources.
YouTube and apps, yeah.
YouTube, it's a great resource, but there's like a ton of stuff on there. How do you even know where to start?
It can be overwhelming for sure. My advice is to be specific with your searches. Instead of just searching TOEFL, try TOEFL speaking tips or TOEFL reading practice.
Ah, so you're more likely to find like targeted content that way.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to try out different channels, different presenters. Find the ones that, click with you, that make learning fun.
Right, because if it's engaging, you're more likely to like stick with it.
Exactly. And don't forget to actually engage with the content. Leave comments, ask questions, connect with other learners.
Okay, so make it a social experience.
Precisely. And then with those apps, those are great for like, when you have a few minutes here and
Yeah,
there.
that's those little pockets of time.
Exactly. You can do some practice questions, review vocabulary flashcards. It all adds up.
And a lot of them have like progress tracking and personalized feedback, which is really helpful.
Absolutely. It's like having a little TOEFL coach in your pocket.
I like that. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different things today: strategies, resources, mindset. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to, believing in yourself.
It does. You have to believe that you can do it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because the TOEFL, it can be tough, but it's not impossible.
It's not. And remember, it's just one test. It doesn't define you.
That's such an important point.
It is.
Yeah.
So, go into that testing center feeling prepared, feeling confident. You've got this.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of the TOEFL deep dive. Hopefully you're feeling a little less intimidated, a little more prepared.
I hope so. Remember, practice consistency and a positive attitude. Those are your keys to success.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And don't forget to check out our other videos for more tips and strategies on, not just TOEFL prep, but all things English learning.
Yeah, we have a lot of great stuff in this channel, so make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything.
And of course, as always, keep practicing, keep learning, and keep talking.